see you. Your existence is valid, and I am so fucking sorry that this is the world you have to live in. Hello, friends. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff. Today, we are going to do a question and answer. As a reminder, you can always send me questions, topics you'd like me to talk about, guest suggestions, anything like that to duffthepsych@gmail.com. Or you can go to my website, duffthepsych.com. There you'll find everything, including a contact page, and you can send me questions on there too. Today, I'm going to be doing just a regular Q&A, no ads or anything like that, so it should be pretty short and sweet. I did want to give a little bit of a shout out at the top here to an app, no affiliation to this app. It's called Finch, and I think it's probably on Google Play and the App Store for iPhone, but it's a really fun app. I'm not using it myself, but a lot of my loved ones and friends are using it, and they've really benefited from it. Essentially, it's like a Tamagotchi. So you have like a little virtual pet, and the way that you are able to get new clothes or different sort of experiences for your pet is by doing habits. So it has a method to basically track habits, and it could be simple things like I brushed my teeth today, or it can be big things like I made a call to a doctor's office that I needed to call. And when you do those things, you get to, raise your pet, and it grows, and you get to do fun things with it. And it also has a lot of built-in tools for like meditation and other self-care related things. And so I think it's something that a lot of you guys would probably enjoy. So it's called Finch. If you just Google Finch app, you could find information about it. Again, no affiliation, but I think that you guys would like it. So check that out. And without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump into the first question. There's some serious stuff we're going to talk about today, but nothing that should be too directly triggering in terms of describing specific traumas or anything like that. So yeah, let's do it. Okay, first question reads, Hi, Dr. Duff. As a trans man, I'm struggling to make sense of the anti-LGBT sentiment and new anti-trans legislation and executive orders going into effect in the U.S. right now. I'm terrified of losing access to HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. I would probably be dead without it, and of potential violence and discrimination against trans people where I live in a deep red state. I find myself doomscrolling and checking the news constantly, which have taken a big toll on my mental health to the point where I'm losing sleep, having daily panic attacks, and contemplating suicide. More than anything, I just feel like I've completely lost faith in humanity, knowing that half the country hates people like me and other minorities. Do you have any suggestions on how to cope with living in a state of constant fear and uncertainty? I know so many others are struggling right now too, so maybe this question can help someone else. Thanks for all you do. Okay, so thank you for writing in. It means a lot to me that you trust me with this question, so thank you for that. First off, I want to normalize the fact that you are struggling. You're not overreacting. There's a lot of stuff going down that is worth having feelings about. Before I dive into the specifics of what we'll talk about here, I want to first acknowledge my bias for anybody listening. Maybe you haven't come across this podcast before. I am an extremely liberal person. I'm diametrically opposed to just about everything Donald Trump says, does, or represents. I am relatively newly out over the past couple of years as a queer person. I have no personal experience of being transgender. I'm cisgender as an individual, but I have people in my life that I love deeply that are trans. I have clients that are trans or non-gender conforming. So I care a lot about these issues. All this is to say that the circumstances you're describing piss me the fuck off. That's about what I can say about it. The potential of losing access to hormone replacement therapy for you, experiencing violence, discrimination, these are all very real concerns. I do want to point out one thing you said in your question. You said that you'd probably be dead without HRT. Of course, I don't know exactly what you specifically mean by that, but I might be able to take an educated guess. In my personal and professional life, I've seen examples of what can happen when you're forced to live a lie and exist as somebody that you're not. Many people in situations like this experience these sort of top-level psychiatric symptoms, things like depression, social anxiety, or even suicidality. But at its core, these symptoms aren't really the issue. They're not the target. It's really the simple fact that you're forced to live a lie, that you cannot be authentic. And so what happens when you build a life around that necessity to not be yourself? It can really screw things up for you. So yes, access to gender-affirming care, including HRT, can be absolutely life-saving. And I hope so very hard for you that you don't have to worry about losing access to your care. But I can absolutely understand why somebody in a position like yours, that would be at the top of your mind, because it probably has saved your life, and to lose it is a very, very scary prospect. I see you. Your existence is valid, and I am so fucking sorry that this is the world you have to live in. There's a lot of this that we don't have any control over. But let's talk about what you can do, because that's really what we're here for. First off, I don't know what your specific situation is, what resources you have in your possession, but I don't think that it's dramatic to consider moving, like, to another location if that's an option to you. Obviously, there's no area of the country where it's completely unaffected by these things that you're talking about. But as somebody from Southern California, I can say that there are definitely better places than others for people that aren't just simply cis white men, right? I know that if I decided to go have a lunch beer today when I was at the office to the brewery next door, I'd be greeted by a pride flag and various pieces of stickers and art confirming that they're a safe space and enthusiastic about being so. I know that the bookstore downtown, is outspoken about reproductive rights and about amplifying voices from marginalized communities. That's awesome. We have our fair share of bigots as well, absolutely. But I can imagine the overall experience of living here is quite different from yours of being in a deep red state, as you mentioned. Moving, obviously, isn't as easy as just snapping your fingers. And we can't all decide to do that at a moment's notice. But I do want to validate it as an option, if that is available to you. It's not running away. It's prioritizing your health. Much in the same way that, say you had COPD or some sort of lung disease and you needed to move somewhere with better air quality. That's not running away from an issue. That's solving an issue by relocating, right? And again, this isn't a perfect solution, but if you have the ability to get somewhere safer, I'd encourage you to think about the possibility of doing that. Aside from moving, can you find any groups in your area that are made of people that you can relate to, or at least that are allied with people like you? Online communities are great. They're indispensable. And sometimes, very often, online communities play a pivotal role in the lives of people who are able to come out as queer, able to come out as trans. It's very important. But there is nothing quite like connecting with individuals in person, to be in community for reals with people who are, again, like you in some sort of way, or at least understand what you're going through. This doesn't even have to be an explicitly, LGBTQ focused place. Things like a coffee shop, pottery studio, an exercise class. Wherever it is that you see that the queerdos, as I like to say, us weird people hang out, just go there, right? If you can tell, you go by a cycling class and you have a look in there, you're like, huh, those are my people, right? Maybe you go take that class, again, coffee shop, wherever, the place that has the pride flag hanging out from, regardless of where you live. Being in community is so important right now to remind you that you're not alone, right? It's just really an important thing. So if you are not connected in that way, just have a look. Being fearful, being hopeless, being isolated, that's a recipe for disaster, right? You talked about the possibility of suicide. You've had those thoughts, and I don't blame you for it, right? Your literal existence is being devalued, is being kind of criminalized to an extent. Like, I get it. Well, I don't get it, but I hear you. But we still want you to try to live, right? And so even if the fear and the hopelessness is harder to change, to budge or make any movement in, at least we can make sure that you're not isolated, because that isolation is very, very often the deciding factor. So we want to try to work on that. Another issue that you mentioned is the doomscrolling. And if anybody isn't familiar with that term, it's what it sounds like: going on social media or news, Reddit, whatever, and just scrolling and seeing all the horrors in real time. So many people listening to this are in the same boat. It's a huge issue. I can't tell you how much I've heard the term doom scrolling, even just this year compared to previous years already. When you have a personal stake in what's going on, or you're simply just a compassionate human with your head not in the sand, it can be very, very hard to cope with the constant influx of information and reactions to that information. But I do think you need to work on it. Some people don't. Some people are just not that affected by seeing the news, by looking at the discourse related to current events. But that's not you. You said that you're getting further wound up, that you're having panic attacks, that you are feeling suicidal. So this is impacting you. You have that sensitivity, and that's not a bad thing, but it's something that you need to pay attention to. To be clear, I think it is absolutely important for you to be informed. I don't want you to avoid knowing what's going on, but there are different ways to engage with the news. And I would have you consider taking a more passive approach. For example, for me, rather than constantly refreshing, social media feeds and news to see the latest political policy or tragedy or personal accounts of suffering, those are there and you can find them. But it's also helpful to find reliable resources that cover news-related information. So I have a podcast that I listen to in the morning from a news outlet. I also usually watch 1 or 2 or 3 YouTube series that kind of break down the latest news later on in the day. And those are prepackaged. I can always go and look more into something specifically if I want to. But that's a way where I'm not exposed like a raw nerve, just letting the horrors of the world flood into me. You can also take some time to curate your feeds on social media. So if you're on Blue Sky or X, you can make specific lists of people that you want to check on. Instagram, Facebook, these meta platforms, you can hide certain types of posts that you don't want to see. You can put a little bit of active effort in to curate your feed and change your algorithm so that it's less harmful to you, but still useful. If you do want to just scroll freely and make sure that you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening at that very moment, you still can. But I would ask that you put some limits on yourself. Be mindful of what you're doing, right? Rather than just idly scrolling in every spare moment, whenever you're in line, whenever you're not actively engaged, just picking up your phone and going straight to doom scrolling, take a moment and ask yourself whether it's an appropriate time to do that before you start. If you keep doing it automatically and you can't help yourself, where you just sort of like open your phone and suddenly you're there scrolling on Reddit or scrolling on X, what have you, maybe you try actually moving where the icon is, where the shortcut on your phone is for that app. I've done that before and realized how much it actually does work out that way. A long time ago, I did a experiment where I think it was Instagram, maybe it was Twitter at the time or something like that. I moved the app and replaced it with like my Notes app or Evernote at that time, something like that. And so I found myself, automatically, accidentally opening up my Notes app because my muscle memory was immediately going for that social media app where that was. So even if you put it into another page, in a folder, somewhere else that's harder for you to easily accidentally slip and fall into, that could be just a little pause that you need to consider, is this a good time to be doing that? Do I want to invite that in right now? I always say this, but the news and the events in the world are happening regardless of your awareness of them. So if something is transpiring, as long as it's not like literally right outside your door, you probably don't need to know every single detail right as it happens. There was a plane crash into a helicopter that happened last night. The fact that I did not follow throughout the entire night for every single update to that situation has no bearing on the fact that it happened. It has no bearing on how it's actually playing out. So me catching up with kind of the more solidified news this morning is just as okay as me following along the night before, except one of them leaves me in a place where I can function a little bit better, right? Just something to think about. Also, it is more important than ever right now for you to be taking care of yourself. And I mean that in every sense. If you've stopped caring for your body, it's time to get back on that, whatever that means to you, right? Maybe it's how you've been eating, maybe it's your activity level, maybe you've stopped taking certain medications or supplements that are important for you. Just check back in and put in a little bit of effort to make sure that you're treating your body in a way that communicates to yourself you're going to keep living in that body for a while, right? Even if you don't know that you want to, even if you're ambivalent about living, if you treat yourself as if you wanted to keep living, it makes a difference. I also think that you probably need to just be doing something with yourself. It's the most simple advice ever, but you need to keep yourself busy. If you have hobbies or old hobbies, try leaning into them. If you don't, it might be a good time to start sampling things and trying things out. If you can channel your fear and frustration, anger, whatever feelings you have into some sort of action, even better. No one person can change these huge tides that we're facing, but even small things like if you are the type of person to go to a political action, a rally, a protest, that can go a huge way toward making you feel just a little bit less hopeless. Even if you don't feel safe enough to do those things out in the community, making your voice heard online, researching so that you know and you can be better informed, things like that can be a step in the direction of doing something. And always, active coping is better than passive. Again, if you're just sitting there stewing in it and really, really just suffering in silence, that's not going to be as helpful, and it's not going to make you somebody who is able to affect the teeny little difference that any of us can in this life, in this world. So think about how you can take action, even if it's not directly related to what's going on, right? If you can do something, it's going to make you feel just that much more in control. Helping others as well is a super, super underrated tool for coping. Taking the focus off yourself for a moment and being there for others is so exceptionally powerful. Even if the people that you're helping aren't directly related to your own struggles and the things that you talked about in your question, it can simply be a healing experience to find some compassion and shared humanity, right? Donating to a food drive or going and volunteering somewhere. Coming up, I'm probably going to be baking some bread for people that are unhoused in my area. And that doesn't really have a ton to do with the most frustrating things for me going on with the government and such right now, but it's something, and it feels like I'm, doing something and it might help somebody. And just that, again, shared humanity is something that is very supportive and healing. The last thing that I'll mention to you is you may want to look into mental health resources if you aren't already. Of course, you could have all of this already on lock and handled, but with the rise of online therapy, one of the exceptionally helpful things is that you can work with a provider from anywhere in your state. So if they're licensed anywhere in your state, you can work with them online as your therapist. So for people in situations like yours where your community might have a very strong anti-LGBTQ sentiment, maybe you can go further out in your state and find somebody to work with that is more allied with you or has similarities to you that you can have a good match with, and you can actually get some help with these things from somebody that gets it. I'm also not sure if you're on any medications for your depression and for your anxiety, but it's totally a valid option. Again, there are good reasons for you to feel the way that you're feeling. There's good reasons for you to feel depressed, for you to feel hopeless, for you to feel anxious, right? But if we can get a little bit of help through modern medicine to just bring down the burden of those symptoms, to reduce how impactful they are, there's no reason to avoid it unless you have some sort of medical reason to avoid it. If you can get a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a help so that the horrors that you're experiencing don't limit you quite as much, I'm all for it. So I know this response doesn't give you a magic wand to fix the situation. I really wish that I could. I would be fucking waving it like crazy already. But I hope this helps you understand you're not alone. You're not doing anything wrong by struggling. And there are some small things that you can do to feel a little bit less out of control. But I'll be thinking of you, and I'm glad that you are still here. Thank you for the question. Okay, so let's get into the second question now. It reads, "Hey Duff, I've been a fan of your podcast since 2019, and it's helped tremendously in overcoming a lot of barriers in my mental health journey. Recently, I've relapsed in my depression because I've been experiencing loss in the form of heartbreak. I confessed to my best friend of many years that I was in love with him. Unfortunately, the feelings weren't reciprocated, and his love for me was strictly platonic. He decided it was best if we took time apart from one another in order to move on. I'm left with a lot of regret because our daily lives have drastically changed. We lived together and went from doing everything together to barely speaking. I guess my question is, how does one handle heartbreak, regret, and the loss of a personal relationship?" Thank you for writing in. Thank you for the kind words about the podcast and how it's helped you as well. Relapsing into depression from a trigger like heartbreak is totally common if it's something that you deal with on a regular basis. The fact that you use the terminology relapse tells me that you've dealt with depression and you've put in some serious work to the point that maybe it isn't normally holding you back on a day-to-day basis. So I want to give you some props for that. Kudos. I'm sure it was really hard for you to find that relative stability when depression is something that presumably has existed in your life for a while. So giving you a little golf clap here. And I'm sorry that it's been disrupted by the current circumstances. Heartbreak sucks. It really, really does. And the situation you described is even more complex because rather than just being rejected by some romantic interest that you might have, this is a best friend and somebody that you've been harboring these feelings toward for a long time, and you finally were out with it. But again, props to you for having the balls to actually confess your feelings, to say something about it. I bet it was terrifying. But regardless of the outcome, you challenged yourself in a really big way, and I think that that is worth recognizing. In the end, once this is something that's in the rearview mirror, you're going to be better for it, for having taken that leap and tested your courage like that. So I am proud of you for that. But situation at hand. You have had feelings for your best friend of many years. You told him these feelings were not reciprocated, and now he said you should spend some time apart. There's a few things to consider here. First, his romantic feelings, or lack thereof, they're what they are, right? He can't control them any more than you can. He didn't do anything wrong by not being attracted to you in that way. And I'm sure that you understand that. Unless, of course, he led you on or lied about that in some sort of way. But generally speaking, it is what it is. We're attracted to who we're attracted to. We're not attracted to who we're not. But one thing I want to point out that I didn't really like so much in what you said is that he decided that you could use some time apart in order to move on. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting that, but my reaction is that's not really his choice to make. Of course, he can do what he wants with himself because he feels a certain way, but he doesn't get to tell you what you need. If he feels like you need time to get over it, that's not his choice, right? That's yours. I don't know what sort of responsibility you carry here in this situation. I think it's always important to consider that, right? What is my 50%, so to speak? What am I doing to maintain or to cause the situation that I'm in? But I can tell you what you do not hold responsibility for. You did not cause this rupture between you by telling him that you have feelings for him, right? You didn't ruin everything. You don't have something to regret because you were honest. If you changed the way that you behaved drastically following that revelation, right? If you started, I don't know, this is just hypothetical, like moping around and, being passive aggressive or doing something that really disrupted the life that you sort of shared in your dwelling, that's one thing. But if you took the rejection about as well as you could and you just kind of struggle with the heartbreak on your own, and what happened was things changed because he is uncomfortable with your feelings, that's on him. That's not on you, right? You didn't do anything wrong just by being honest. If you started treating him poorly because you felt sad or resentful, that's one thing, but it doesn't sound like it. So what can we do here? There's a few things I think that can be done to try to resolve the situation and move forward a bit. First off, make sure that you have support through this depressive episode. Your loved ones, your therapist, etc. Again, just like the question before, please don't suffer through this in a vacuum because that's where things become worse and become dangerous. Next, when it comes to coping with the rejection itself and the loss of the hopes that you had, that's going to take some time and you need to be patient with yourself. It's sort of like a grieving process. You had an idea for a potential future, and that image kind of has to die now. And if you feel grief, different stages of it, that's going to be something that just needs to take its course, but it's normal. You will move forward from this, but it doesn't happen instantly. Speaking as somebody personally who has absolutely been torn up by heartbreak before, I can be a sensitive guy. I can say that putting specific effort toward processing your feelings pays serious dividends in the end, right? Actively trying to approach these things. I took my last breakup pretty hard. But one thing that I did that really, really helped was journaling. And not just journaling every so often, hitting it hard, almost like you're training at the gym for something. Journaling every single day, sometimes twice a day. And I know that sounds like a lot, but basically you want to approach and demystify what happened. Look at the way that you feel about it. Look at what you hoped for. Look at what you're sad about. Think about what you wish happened. Think about what might be if it never happened. What you're fearing, everything else that might come out in relation to this revelation and, him changing the way that he acts around you. So you want to write that down and just keep writing over and over and over, even if you're repeating yourself, to the point where you just don't have anything left to say. Basically, you've gotten it all out. You've pulled it out into the light. You've demystified it, and you're left with what you're left with. Also, don't let the sadness and the depression stay precious and protected. Depression really, really likes to be in the dark. It wants to keep itself safe by isolating you, by not letting you do anything about it. So don't let that happen. Call it out. Call it out with those in your life that serve as supports, and call it out to yourself. Speaking of calling things out, you may also need to take the lead in having some serious conversations with your friend. If you haven't already, you may need to bring up the fact that he's changed the way that he acts around you, and that makes you feel bad. Ask him why. Ask him if there's anything that you need to hash out, anything that you guys need to really, really discuss, right? Why is this still happening? If it turns out that the situation and your relationship is irreparable, again, that's not on you, right? You didn't do anything wrong by saying how you felt. But it's important to recognize that maybe it is something that needs to change. It's hard to heal in an environment that's actively hurting you. So if your friend is completely blowing you off, avoiding you, making you feel like a pariah, and there are no signs that he's going to change or meet you in the middle somewhere, maybe it's time to move on from the situation. And that will hurt all over again. It'll be like reopening the wound. But if you have to separate from each other and actually, not live together or something like that, it could help to give more of a definitive end and allow for healing to take its course. I don't know if this is the case. I hope that you guys can hash it out and things can gradually return to something like normal, but it's something that may need to happen if that's not possible. Lastly, again, as with the other response, you also need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, that you're getting out there, that you're connecting with humans, and that you're caring for all aspects of your wellness. Even if you feel like you don't deserve to care for yourself because you're feeling exceptionally depressed, you need to act as if you do and prove to yourself that you are a worthwhile human that deserves to be cared for. This means finding ways to celebrate your life in this very moment, things that you have right now, rather than only having regret and lamenting the possibility of what you might have had. I don't know what that will look like for you, but since you're not doing everything together anymore, maybe you can connect with people that you haven't been spending as much time with recently. Maybe you can focus more on your relationship to yourself, even take yourself out on some solo dates. I personally remember I've done this before, and one of the most impactful solo dates that I've had, it sticks with me because it was kind of a turning point. I was walking to a bookstore. I walked to a bookstore locally and browsed. I bought a few books. I think I bought 3 books. They're still on my bookshelf back there. And then I took them with me. I went to go grab a beer and read by myself. And I took a notebook so I can take some notes. And I had no agenda other than just like, let some influence come in. Let me read some of these books. Let me take some notes. And it was really helpful. This was at a time when I was still really struggling with jealousy in my non-monogamous relationship that I'm in. And that sense of celebrating my own time, saying, I'm actually going to make this something good rather than just trying to make it something that's not bad, that was really helpful. And it helped me to realize that I could celebrate my independence, and that helps me be less threatened by external forces. So maybe something like that can be helpful for you as well. But remember, overall, you don't hold all the fault in this situation. There are things that you can do to take better care of yourself and to clarify where you stand. Things can absolutely get much better from here, and I really hope that they do. So thank you for reaching out. And that's what I got for you guys. That's the end of the episode. Thank you very, very much for listening. As a reminder, I really, really always appreciate it if you go and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen on. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment and say hi. I do have these posted on YouTube as well as podcast platforms now, always. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'll talk to you in the next episode, which will probably be an interview. So stay safe out there and keep sending me in questions.